Give it just a minute here. Make sure everybody's in the room with us. Okay, well, I think we probably mostly all here. Maybe we'll have some other joiners as folks are making their way from one session to another. But welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this breakout session. Every Native American student counts. We're so glad that you decided to join us for this session today. I'm going to go ahead and get us started with our standard disclaimer. Oh, and I better make sure, yep, should be able to hear this.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
All right. Well, now that we've got that out of the way, I want to welcome everybody. My name is Tracy Karageorge. I will be your facilitator for today. Before I get to introducing our presenter for today, I just want to go over a couple of logistical tips and tricks today because we are in a webinar format. And that means that the most ways that we get to interact with you is through that chat box. So if you're watching us on that Pathable platform right now, to the right of where you see us, you'll see those 4 tabs labeled chat, polls, files, and people. I see folks are already starting to say hello in that chat box. I see you, Nebraska. I see you, Oklahoma, Arkansas, California, Alaska, North Dakota. We're so happy to have you here. Say hello in the chat box if you haven't already, and also let us know about maybe what your role is, so we know who's here with us today. I know we have some project directors, but other staff members were also invited to join us in this project directors meeting as well. So periodically we will pause for questions, and we'll take your questions through the chat box as well. The other way, other than the chat box, you can click on that polls tab. Now, right at the top right now, if you click on it, you should be able to see enter your questions for the speaker. That's another way that you can post questions, and that'll come to us, and we'll make sure that our presenter knows about those questions as well. And throughout the session, we'll probably reference those files that are available for download. So with that, I would like to welcome our presenter today, Mandy Smoker Broadus. I will introduce her now by saying that Mandy has nearly 20 years of experience working towards social justice, equity, inclusivity, and cultural responsiveness, particularly in this realm of American Indian education. She has served at the Tribal College, K-12, and state education agency levels across her home state of Montana, where she is an enrolled member of the Assiniboine and Sioux tribes at the Fort Peck Reservation. Her accolades are many, and I'll mention a few here, including she has led the Schools of Promise initiative to develop a new model for improving Montana's lowest performing schools, which were all located on a reservation in Montana. She also led the state Indian Education for All work that has served as a model for many other states, to include American Indian identity, culture, and history in their educational systems. I'm sure you've heard of the Montana work, Indian Education for All. She also received the 2015 National Indian Educator of the Year Award from NIEA, and more recently was appointed by President Obama to the National Advisory Council on Indian Education. Currently, Mandy works with Education Northwest, and she's here today to share some of the work that she supported under a former regional educational laboratory contract that address the need for ensuring accurate counts of Native American youth. We're so happy to have you here today, Mandy. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tracy, and thank you all for joining us for this session. Native student identification has been a very, very salient and important topic, and I think we need to continue engaging with it across communities and stakeholder groups, and really try to do something to improve this sort of current circumstance that we're living in. So really this work and what I'm going to share today talks about those data challenges that were, for us, for my organization, Education Northwest, really first sort of rose to prominence for us because of our partnership with the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians. They have a subgroup, a working group that's essentially an education committee called the Northwest Tribal Educators Alliance. So that's sort of a part of the ATNI, Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians. It's like a little subgroup. And among that group, when we were supporting them as their regional education laboratory, this issue really rose to the top quite a few years ago. And so we began to dedicate resources and time to research and investigate and really learn more and share out with stakeholders sort of what those findings were, in hopes that they would be useful, in particular to families and to communities. I want to just really quickly acknowledge that the work, this work has primarily been led by two colleagues that don't work for us any longer, but they're still out there doing wonderful research and work in Indian country, Phyllis Alt and Laura John. And then later, my good colleague, Sarah Pierce, really continued the work with some of the tools, in particular an infographic and a video that we'll share with you today. So really indebted to them for their dedication to this issue. I think we all know that without accurate data, it's impossible to track the improvements or areas of challenge in American Indian Alaska Native student success, their overall educational trajectory. We need those data points to be able to help us tell stories and also, chart new paths. So again, this can overall, the Native youth count issue overall can undermine confidence in data and information about Native students and our communities. It also suggests, and we have heard this story from various states and communities, that there are students who are eligible for educational services designated for American Indian or Alaska Native students. So those services and opportunities may not be trickling down. Those students may not be receiving them because of these data collection challenges that we have. Obscured Identities is a white paper that was written by the colleague I just mentioned, Laura John, in 2017, so 5 years ago, again, through the ATNI group and then our education subcommittee. And it really, came to fruition because those folks in attendance that worked at schools, universities, state education agencies were navigating these challenges with respect to the identification of American Indian or Alaska Native students. And we know that in large part that's due to the revision of the Department of Education's policies and systems for tracking race and ethnicity, which created, I think, unforeseen complications for K-12 districts and Native families. That revision added a question that requires students to identify first, as many of you probably know who are participating today, whether they're Hispanic or Latino. If students indicate that they are both or Hispanic and Latino and American Indian or Alaska Native, they're recorded as being only Hispanic or Latino. Additionally, when students select the multiracial category, then they're no longer included in the American Indian, Alaska Native race, ethnicity category. So again, keeping these conversations alive, continuing to gather information and stories and data to really demonstrate, the urgency of this issue that we're faced with. And I do want to just quickly mention the work of a colleague, Alex Redcorn, is really diving into this in important research, with important research methodologies. And also the state of Michigan is really trying to address some of these challenges. And I think those bright spots out there are things that we need to continue to highlight, and the new work bring it to the table so that we can really figure out this challenge, because really what's behind this, what's at stake here, is about continuing to strengthen tribal sovereignty, ensure that Native students are visible and counted, and really upholding those treaty obligations in regards to education, and truly supporting the needs of Native students and their families. So I mentioned the white paper, which you can access. I believe it's in the resource list that you have on the main site. If not, we'll get it in there. And that white paper, again, really led to further discussions about what would be most useful and helpful out there in schools and communities. And it was determined that creating a guide that could provide guidance about the multiple federal programs and the nuances of identifying American Indian Alaska Native youth, that would be valuable to get out into the hands of families, so that we could hopefully capture more of those Native students in our programs and in our schools. So this was our what we call an infographic, basically a 3-page brochure that goes over a lot of those details. What are the federal programs? What is the definition by which someone can be American Indian or Alaska Native to be eligible for those services or to participate, because they're not all the same, which further complicates things. And it also asks some really important questions about tribal enrollment and also English language learner sort of contexts. So this is the first page of the guide. We can jump one over. Thank you. Again, intended to be a resource for families and those that are caregivers for American Indian or Alaska Native students. So again, trying to make sure that we understand or that we continue to promote that, if we identify students accurately, we can then, provide them with the additional supports and services that they need, that obviously, can result in improved just academic and well-being outcomes for those students, higher graduation rates, hopefully stronger attendance, and ultimately a greater sense of identity and belonging. And really the only way that we can do that is by ensuring that those students are visible and seen as American Indian or Alaska Native in our schools. Next slide. So this is a list of those eligible programs: Title VI, Head Start, Johnson O'Malley, Migrant Education, which we have another separate infographic about that, but it's something that sometimes gets overlooked as well among American Indian and Alaska Native communities. Special Education, McKinney-Vento, the Homeless Act, and then bilingual education and Title III services. And so you can see there that, sort of some characteristics of potential students, young people, and then what programs that attaches to what programs they might be eligible for. Next slide. This is the final page of the infographic. poses some frequently asked questions that are, we hear in schools or communities about Native American students from families and caregivers, and sort of what services might exist in support, not just services, but also other supports that might be in place to help families. There are some important forms that are available there, which we'll talk about more in just a minute. And then also a list of if you're in a community and you're not sure, your family members aren't sure of who those potential contacts might be in their schools, this is just sort of a list that you could inquire locally about which of these positions might be in place, might be a resource for those families. And of course, the back of this document there at the bottom, we can go to the next slide. We have, this is just a partial list of some of the research that was used in developing that infographic and the white paper. There are others that will be included in a full bibliography for you. But in particular, that we have a finding that American Indian and Alaska Native categorization is the least stable self-identification for those programs and the services that come with them. So again, this is really sort of an ongoing urgent issue. And then also, with that second piece by Burnett, many tribal citizens are of mixed heritage. And so how do we sort of come into that, and how do we center those students and make sure that these undercounts are alleviated? Before we go on, can we talk really, I see that there has been a question in the Pathable chat. Cara from Virginia is having these conversations with districts throughout Virginia and the tribal communities there, that the multiracial category is essentially losing our students. And then also the conversation has actually led to a change in registration forms. That's great. That will be one of the recommendations that we'll share out here in just a minute. If there are others having similar challenges, the best advice I can give is do not be afraid to begin that conversation. It has been well received thus far. That's great, Cara. Thank you for sharing that direct experience. Others feel free to do that as well. In particular, if there are solutions that you all have found that help to alleviate this. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so just a few promising practices for K-12 districts in particular. I know that our audience varies as far as the role or where you work actually as grantees. Some are districts, tribally operated schools, others tribal education departments. You may be in a position to actually institute some of these, recommended practices, or you might be able to advocate or influence in some circumstances, again, to really elevate and highlight this issue. So one of the first is having those registration forms, and district student information systems include that specific American Indian Alaska Native student information, matching up to what is required on those 506 forms, standardizing those menus, if you can do them virtually, to include tribes, that students can select. Also really important. That's really been a big push in Wisconsin, in the state of Wisconsin, to try and include tribal affiliation in that student identification system across the state. Really important to train those folks that handle that enrollment data entry and information, as well as administration staff, support staff, and administrators themselves, to really understand that information and why it's valuable on the 506. Make sure that there's a really specific policy that designates staff that are going to be overseeing and entrusted with this 506 information. That in particular, that, hopefully providing regular updates to the school administrators, really being in touch. The example there is from LA Unified School District that requires principals, they have a policy, requires principals to delegate student certification responsibilities to an administrative staff member. So again, just making sure that that is actually a policy, and that we can, go to it and point to it and use it. Providing regular announcements about Title VI programming and services in a district or school is important, because that might catch the eye or create curiosity in a parent or family member. Maybe there are American Indian, Alaska Native students that, again, are not counted and are not served, but that information might, if it's out there more publicly, might make people interested or curious. Next slide. So, somewhat similarly, what are promising practices for Title VI departments? Again, making sure that there's a place on the district's website that hopefully can provide a direct live link to that form, an electronic version that could be submitted online. Also important to make sure that we have those paper copies available. Make sure that the 506 information becomes a permanent part of the student record. I think we have all heard about or experienced, having to continue do that data collection year after year, and there should be really a way with our more sophisticated data systems to really lock that information in. Request that schools run a report for students who indicated American Indian or Alaska Native as their second ethnicity on an enrollment application. Provide the names of those students to the Indian Education Office, to the Title VI program. Again, offer training on that data collection and the 506 form to anyone who handles district enrollment. Record trainings so that they can be available and like a required watch every time someone new is brought in. And then again, just getting more information out there, developing a fact sheet, other tools or resources that really talk about the Title VI program, not just for administrators, but really, those could be shared around the community as well. And I know a lot of Title VI programs do that already. So now we have come to a polling moment. Which promising practices for identifying Native students are currently used if you work more directly with a district that you work with? Can you sort of go into the poll and let us know? That would be helpful information.
Yeah, so if you are looking at that Pathable platform right now, next to that chat tab, you see the tab labeled polls, and right at the top, there should be right at the top, which of the promising practices that Mandy just described for identifying Native students are you currently using, if any? It's not a gotcha moment. We're not reporting to anybody with this poll. We really just want to know, like, are you using these strategies, and how are they working for you? So go ahead and submit your answers there. And we'll take a look and see the results. So we've got a few responses so far. It looks like at least a couple of folks are including the ED 506 forms in student enrollment packets. We've got a few people who are also requesting schools run a report for students who indicated American Indian Alaska Native as their secondary ethnicity. Oops, that one just bumped up to 4 now. And then we've got another 4 people who indicate that they I read that one. That provide training for district enrollment and administration staff. Another 4 responses indicate that they are using the ED 506 form information, that they added the ED 506 form information to district student information systems.
Great.
So far, let's see, it doesn't look like anybody has using the recorded trainings or making recordings available online for new and existing staff. And just one response each for developing an online ED 506 form or adding a link, providing regular announcements. Oh, we do have somebody who said they've made some recorded trainings.
Great.
Would love to hear a little bit about that in the chat box here. I see a comment here from Pamela. We are an Alaska Native nonprofit representing our region. All participants in our programs have to submit a tribal ID or enrollment letter with their application for services. Oh, and I see another comment here from Carmelita. In institutions of higher education, I believe students self-identify, not really sure. For my program, I asked for tribal ID or descendant information.
I believe you're correct too, Dr. Lamb. Yeah, it's self-identification when you get to that higher education level. United Tribes Technical College requires a CDIB. I'm not sure what that is. Certificate of Degree of Indian Blood. I just remembered. Yeah, okay. It just took me a second. Thanks, Kayla. Well, we have a second poll. Which promising practices for identifying Native students would you like to see implemented in your contexts?
So I'm looking at the responses here. Those of you who heard about something that you'd like to try. Oh, it looks like far and away the developing a Title VI Indian Education fact sheet is something folks would like to try. So far we got 5 responses for that. 2 each for adding the 506 form to the information systems. 3 now for developing an online ED 506 form with standardized spellings of tribes and tribal confederacies. Another 3 votes for including those forms in the permanent record and training, enrollment, and administration staff. I'd be curious if anybody has any anything to share in the chat about when, where, how often, or what sorts of information you include in those trainings. Oh, and I see we do have a few comments here. Jackie says, in Oklahoma, a bill was passed mandating that all schools record what tribe they are citizens. And with our monthly meetings, we assist schools with those forms. Okay. Pamela writes, and many of our youth have not gone through the enrollment process for their tribe, and we work with them to apply with their tribe. Jackie shares that the data office within our state is now working with vendors and schools to assist with the data. And I'm sorry, Jackie, can you remind us what state you're working in? I should probably.
She's from Oklahoma.
Oh. Mandy knows everyone.
She's the native education head at the department.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Checking back at the poll results here. Yeah, developing a fact sheet seems like it's winning the would like to try category.
That's great. Yeah, I think that the more we can present information about our, these programs and services, not only for the students and families that are eligible, but just for the greater community, I think that's really valuable, and just provides more opportunity again to have these discussions and to really talk about how valuable and how important they are for our Native students in ensuring that districts continue to work on their trauma-informed lens, that they continue to really advance cultural responsiveness in all rounds of the system, that they provide the additional supports and services that again are guaranteed to our youth. So important. We wanted to show you also accompanying that 3-page graphic that I shared with you. We also at Education Northwest created a student identification video that we hope it can be accessed on YouTube. And again, I think that link is in that resources list for you all. But a really a great tool and a conversation starter. We'll play this right now.
All students deserve a high-quality education. For many students, this includes having access to services and supports that can help them succeed in school. American Indian and Alaska Native students are eligible to receive unique educational supports from a variety of programs. However, each year, many Native students do not receive the services they need and qualify for simply because they are not identified as Native. Accurate identification of Native students is crucial for Native communities in several ways. First, accurate identification helps ensure that the programs designed to support Native students are being appropriately funded. Next, accurate identification helps uphold federal treaty obligations. When Native students do not have access to Indian education programs, their treaty rights are violated. Finally, accurate identification is needed to help schools and communities reliably track Native student achievement. So, how can you support accurate identification of Native students? A good place to start is to be aware of some misperceptions about Native youth. Native youth identity is complex. You cannot identify Native students simply based on their appearance or where they live. For example, more than 3/4 of Native students are enrolled in public schools that are not located on or near an Indian reservation. In fact, the majority of Native students in the United States are enrolled in urban school districts. An important thing to keep in mind is that Native students may be connected to their heritage in different ways. Not all will be enrolled in a federally recognized tribe. Some will have no contact with their heritage or traditions, and many identify as multiracial. Teachers and school staff members can help improve accurate identification by engaging with families and tribal communities to help determine which programs Native students might be eligible for. Native Youth Count is a resource that can help clarify the circumstances in which Native students are eligible for different services. For example, if you have students who are members or descendants of a federally or state-recognized tribe, they may be eligible for different Indian education programs under Title VI, including summer programs and tutoring services. For Native families with young children, Head Start offers early learning programs and school readiness resources specifically designed for Native students. Not all programs require tribal membership. Many are based on specific circumstances. For example, Native students who have moved in the past 3 years with or to join a parent seeking seasonal employment may be eligible for migrant education programs. And students who have a physical or mental disability may be eligible for culturally responsive special education services. Native Youth Count can help schools and families identify programs that Native students might be missing out on. For teachers and school staff members, consider having a few copies of this tool on hand to share with families or colleagues. Successfully engaging with Native families and tribal leaders is essential to help improve accurate identification of Native students. Traditionally, educators might start their engagement efforts by inviting families or tribal leaders to come to the school. Instead, think about how you can meet with Native families and tribal leaders in places or at events that are important to them, such as a community gathering or even a sports game. It can take some effort to move beyond the typical model of inviting Native families and tribal leaders into the school building, but it is an important part of respectfully engaging with Native communities. Consider creating an engagement plan for your school or district. Working toward accurate identification of Native students is an ongoing process. Here are 3 actions you can take immediately. Share what you've learned about Native student identification with your colleagues. Develop a plan for reaching out to tribal community resource centers and Native families. Review school and district policies that may inadvertently contribute to misidentification or service gaps for Native students. Together, we can ensure that all Native students get the support and services they need to thrive.
So again, that link should be available to you, and feel free to share that out with anybody that you think might find that information useful or helpful. We really created these tools, the white paper, the infographic, and the video, again, to increase communication and to hopefully help continue to inform not only schools, but families and tribes in engaging in this really important conversation. You can go to the next slide. These references from this presentation are here and available, which you can download from the files section of the conference room page as well. And then we wanted to have time for questions, additional comments. I see that Jackie has definitely been providing some very useful information around the context in Oklahoma, where I believe a new law was passed. Is that what you saw? Yeah, Oklahoma bill passed regarding school records, and that tribal citizenship be included, and that working with vendors, and then also just doing more at the local level has resulted in Oklahoma in the numbers of identified students increasing. So that's a great experience to relate, Jackie. Thank you.
Feel free to pose your questions there in the chat box, or you can submit those into the polls section as well. If you have any questions. Here I see a few comments coming in through the polls. Maybe as strategies that you want to maybe try. The ED 506 forums. There's a comment there too about the state of LA reports on ethnicity, unsure of accuracy. Maybe you know what they're referring to there, Mandy, or maybe that person wants to say a few more words in the chat box.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm assume that's Louisiana, but I'm not clear on how that works.
Was just taking a quick glance back at our poll as well about promising practices would you like to implement, and it looks like we've gotten a few more responses there around training, district enrollment and administrative staff, adding that information to the 506 form to the information systems. And again, the fact sheet seems to be the #1 vote getter in terms of what they would like to try. And I posed a question there in the chat box too. If there's, do you think these resources would be useful in doing some of that, or maybe some of you are using this infographic or the video already? We'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Or are there other tools that would be helpful? Because again, we have to keep this conversation alive, so we need to continue to develop whatever's going to be most useful.
Yeah, those of you who did respond to the poll and saying that you're using some of these strategies already, would love to hear some comments if you have any tips or advice or things you learned along the way for maybe getting that information into the district information systems. Maybe you can help pave the way for your colleagues who are on the call here today, or making sure that those enrollment forms are included in the enrollment packets. Some of you have a Title VI Indian education fact sheet. Maybe that's something you'd be willing to share. If you have a link, or maybe if you, one way to share that, here, I'll just quickly share my screen so that in case you haven't found it yet, you know where you can find it. So here's the landing page for our session, the way it looks on my screen right now. But if you go up here into these top tabs, in the conversations tab, you see discussion boards, and you can create a new conversation here related to Native student counts. It allows you to attach an image if you want. So you can make a post related to, if you have some information to share, type a message there, give it a subject line. So that's a way to keep the conversation alive and share. I know our landing page for this session doesn't have sometimes in Zoom, you can share a document in the chat, but in our chat in Pathable, we don't have that ability, but that discussion board is someplace where we can share that information. Oops, here we go. So for those of you who have strategies that you want to try, what questions do you have for your colleagues who have tried those strategies? Everyone's either thinking really hard or maybe listening with lunch by their side. Carmelita posted a comment there, still grappling with how institutions of higher education can be more thoughtful in this through the admissions process. I feel Native scholars are undercounted across the U.S.
I know in Montana, which is my home state, we have developed a longitudinal data system that tracks our Montana students into higher education, but only for the Montana University system, so that their data follows them, but that includes your race ethnicity information, Dr. Lamb. So you could do that. It would be probably more difficult to do across states, but there are ways to do that within states.
Our data goes to the monster PEDS, is her follow-up. Yes, and I think we have a question here from Ryan. Do we have a list of states that track their data in a way that allows students to slip through?
Ryan, thanks for the question. I think it's easier to track the places where they're trying to create changes to those systems or processes to try and address this challenge. Again, I mentioned Wisconsin, Michigan. I know Montana has been trying to address it for a long time. Washington State. Again, just trying to find those solutions so those students do show up, right? Are not rendered invisible and do receive those services and supports.
So we have a comment from Spencer. Our district records CIB, certified Indian blood. Is that what we said?
Certificate, yeah.
Certificate, yes. Enrollment numbers, which is necessary for funding application for impact aid, and this report is submitted annually. Trinidad shares a challenge that we have is data collection. We're limited on what information can be collected, shared, or stored, and our project uses some basic non-identifiable collection methods.
That I'm wondering if for Trinidad, if that is at the higher education level. Because I think at the state K-12 and even the BIE, within the BIE, you're required to enter that information in to a secure system, of course. Yes, okay. Definitely with research, institutional review boards, all that sort of thing, very important. Any ideas on how to count students if the enrollment for the local tribe is closed once child reaches age 5? Mandy, does that mean that you can't enroll beyond age 5 in your context? That's what it sounds like, right, Tracy? Okay. For some of the programming, being able to demonstrate descendancy through various methods is adequate, which I think should be that way for all programs, personally. But again, there are some that do require that proof, and if that's the tribe's decision to have that policy or practice, I think again, it's a great local conversation to be had in understanding the impact of a policy like that. And again, definitely not stepping on tribal sovereignty toes at all, because that should be a decision made there and by that nation. But again, no harm can come from talking about it and bringing this issue up. Yes, Spencer points out an issue. Sometimes students are members of 2 or more tribes. And they might, be more closely connected or live on one of the reservations, but that tribe's policy won't allow them to enroll due to blood quantum policies or restrictions. And again, this is just really part of the challenge here, is that it puts an undue burden on families to have to try and, navigate all these different sort of guidelines. And so, the only real solution in that situation is to try and reach out to the other tribe. But again, that's, a level of extra work and effort that is, I know, can be challenging. Scott asks how Ed 506 forms are processed and verified. And I am wondering if any of my Office of Indian Ed colleagues are on. because I don't know, and I don't think there is a verification process. But if there is, I will stand corrected. No one has typed anything in the chat yet, Scott, but maybe they will. Jack, what can you explain what the document is that you get? Yes, I can definitely see, Shanna, why there would be some challenges coming from with students from Canada. Yes, Jack. So keeping that information on file as like a membership card or something else that shows their descendancy. I've just never been in a context where the department came in and verified that information as an audit or something else, but others may have experienced that. Rachanda comments that can't access information from the tribe unless the parent or caregiver or guardian gives consent. And I would say that that can also be part of the issue, in that tribes can't often receive school level data and information from the schools where their citizens are served. So I think that sort of data, that hub between the schools and tribes can be problematic both ways. Jackie, when you say Oklahoma does, do you mean that there's someone that goes through each one of those forms and verifies? Because I'm not sure how you would, I mean, other than check the information that they present. I know in Montana, when I was the director of Indian education, we did not do that.
I see Jack has responded there in the chat about their 506 form asking for a roll number. Maybe that as a piece of verification.
Yes, I've seen that, but I also believe you can demonstrate descendancy as well, and that might be the roll number of a grandparent or parent. and she had one desk audit 10 years ago. Minnie asks, is there a hard rule against providing Title VI services to non-federally recognized tribes in California? Is this expressly prohibited? I believe state recognized tribes can participate if federal recognition has not been regained yet. Yes, Jack. Yeah, Karen says yes on the grandparent. Yeah, you can enter in their information as well. But Minnie, you might be talking about tribes in California that aren't state recognized as well, and I do not know in that circumstance. And Jackie does point out that Title VI honors state and federally recognized enrollment, but Johnson O'Malley will not take students from state recognized tribes. Jackie, do you know? She's the Title VI expert. Jackie, do you know about non-recognized tribal groups in the state? Probably not. Well, those are some really great questions, as well as information from your local contexts. I really appreciate that. Will not take, Jackie says. Okay. There is no state recognition in California. I did not know that, Minnie. That's a definite challenge or a barrier. And that is probably exacerbated, Minnie, by the fact that California just offered tuition to any federally recognized tribal member in state to the UC system. But if you're among those other tribal groups, that would be yes. Okay. That would be frustrating.
So many nuances and challenges around this particular issue. I'm going to give a last call. Oh, here is that. We have another comment here.
Yes, Jack, I did see that. Yes, that Rancheria is going to offer tuition for those that are non-federally recognized.
Well, we're getting near the close of our session here, and if you have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and give a last call for any questions that you have for either each other or Mandy in the time that few minutes that we have left here. I'm also going to lift up our session rating poll here. If you click on that polls tab, you'll see one more poll lifted up to the top there that we include for all of our sessions. You can give us between 1 and 5 stars, five being this was awesome, So you can let us know and give us feedback on today's session. I see some other comments kind of still coming in here about the importance of training and that sort of thing here. But if you do have other questions for each other, or you want to continue this conversation, you can definitely check out that discussion board. That's something that we all have access to, and we can respond to there. So like Mandy said, we want to keep the conversation alive and going.
Thank you so much, all of you, for joining and for sharing. That's really important. I'm not a Title VI expert. I'm really interested in data and information, though. And I want to thank the Office of Indian Education for letting us share out on this topic and some of the resources we've created.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy, for taking time. I know you also wear a lot of hats and juggle a lot of responsibilities. So thank you for being here to share these resources with us here today. And again, folks, if you are using some of these strategies and you have any resources that you think would be helpful for your colleagues, definitely follow up in that discussion board. And we're gonna give you back a few minutes of your day so you can go refresh that cup of coffee before your next session. And I hope to see you at some of the networking sessions here at the end of the day. So remember to give us our stars before you leave, and thank you so much.